So, real quick, honor geometry on Fun Socks Friday, March 6, 2020. SCBA students will be able to use inverse trig functions to find measures of angles, section 7.6, okay? Now, this is our last section, okay? What we're going to do, actually, is that, even though this is our last section, we're going to finish our notes today. We're going to, next Trooper-Type Tuesday, we have class, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to work on some trig work problems. We're going to work on some work problems and start some review. Then what we're going to do on Thursday, not take a test, but actually what we're going to do on Thursday is we're going to do kind of a different day, kind of like a, we'll do a different type of thing, a different activity, is what I'll call it now. And then after spring break. Then after spring break, we have class Tuesday, Thursday again. Okay. On Tuesday, we're going to be reviewing. On Thursday, we'll take that test. Okay, so we'll come back, we'll have a day of review, then we'll take tests. That way you don't have like a day of review, a day, like you don't have like review, spring break, test. Because otherwise it's kind of tough to come back right after spring break and have a test. I feel like it's not very nice. So that's how we're going to break it up. Okay, Simone. Okay, you're going to be excommunicated. Dashiell? Who else is not going to be here Thursday? Raise your hand. Okay. You guys are all excommunicated. Okay. What?
I'm not going to be there the Tuesday after spring.
I don't think that's Tuesday after spring break.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So, just talk to me next Trooper-Type Tuesday and we'll get it figured out. So, we have these things called inverse trigonometric ratios. These are the trig ratios. Trigonometrics is the long form. Trig is the shortened form. Okay, like you're triggered. So we have the sine, cosine, and tangent. These three trig ratios we learned. There's actually three more later, and then there's actually like six more after that. But we're gonna learn. So every time in math, we've learned a function or an operation, and then we learn how to undo it. Like we learned addition back when we were in elementary school, right?
Yeah.
And then what did you learn after addition?
Multiplication.
Subtraction, which undoes it. They're called inverse operations because they undo each other. Okay? So then, a little later in elementary school, you learned multiplication. And then what did you learn that undoes multiplication? Subtraction.
Why are we learning the inverse of this?
And then, you learned exponents. Like later on, you learned exponents. And what did you learn that undid exponents?
Subtraction.
Square roots.
Oh,
Okay? Square roots. Like what undoes a square is a square root. What undoes a cube is a cube root. What undoes a power to the 4 is a fourth root. Okay?
Anything else we learned?
Yeah. Like for example, the fourth root of 16 is 2. Because 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 16. 2 to the fourth is 16, so the fourth root of 16 is 2. You're gonna have fun next year.
No,
Okay? Just ask Peyton and Taylor. Fourth roots, right?
They're dumb, yes, they're very
Yeah,
dumb.
see, they love them. Okay? So, thanks for my point, guys. They're fun. Okay? So, Owen's really excited for them. Okay? Actually, I heard him talk about it in practice yesterday. He decided he couldn't wait to do fourth roots. So, he came over to the side and told me during a water break.
He barely ever talks. How would you hear that?
He and I
He
have a
talks.
good bond.
He talks when you're mean to him, right?
Is that when you talk? Gotcha.
See, he just said very
You're mean to him? Gotcha. She call you a rat? Don't let it get to you. He's the real rat. Okay. Rats like to call people rats. That happens.
Short takes one to no one.
I'm pretty sure you literally called Kevin a rat earlier.
I know what you're talking about. So, that's what I made up. So we're going to learn inverse trig ratios. So last class we learned these trig ratios, which are operations. Okay? We take the sine, cosine, tangent of an angle. We take the sine, cosine, tangent of an angle. So now we're going to learn to go the other way around. So if sine of angle A, like for example, like sine of 57 degrees was equal to something, because we said we could actually figure out what sine of 57 degrees was equal to, we made those ratios. And sine of angle A is just equal to x right now. Then we have the that angle A is equal to the inverse sine of x. Angle A is equal to the inverse sine of x.
That's what that means.
So the sign, it looks like sine to the negative first. We don't say it like that at all, and we're not actually, we're not actually doing a negative exponent where you extend it to the bottom, or you reciprocate it, like a negative exponent would. But we read this as the inverse sign. So you write it sine to the negative first, but we read it as inverse sign. Okay, how do we read that?
Negative or
Inverse sign. Yeah, how do we read that?
Inverse sign.
Inverse sign. Okay, one more time just to annoy you guys. How do we read this?
Inverse
sign. Okay. So what happens mathematically between here and here, how we get there, is you start off with sine of angle A is equal to x. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do it like that. So then I would take I'll just do a different color. If I wanted to get angle A by itself, let's say we're now solving for an angle. Because last class, what we did on the homework was we solved these for what? Sides or angles? Sides. Now we're going to actually solve for angles. Okay, we're going to be given two sides and we're going to find the angle of a right triangle. Okay, one of the non-right angles. So what I do is I say, I want angle A by itself, so how do I undo sine? I do the inverse of that. So I say, how do I undo multiplication? I do division, the inverse. How do I undo sine? I do the inverse sine. And I take the inverse sine of both sides. Now I don't have a lot of room here, so I'm just going to write it up above that equal sign there. I'm going to take the inverse sine of both sides. Now if we look back to earlier, when we had multiplication and division going together, we see they undid each other, right? They simplified out. Same thing, inverse sine and sine simplify out. So what we are left with is that angle. So we have angle A is now equal to the inverse sine of x. Now if you look down at your calculators, or if you have an iPhone or an Android and you push second on your calculator, you should see that sine to the negative first, aka inverse sine, pop up. You should see that inverse sine button pop up. Does everyone see that on their calculator? On your scientific calculators, the ones I have, okay, you see it right above the sign with the second button. Okay, the second right there. Okay, that's where you see inverse sine pop up. Question on that? So, okay.
No.
If cosine of angle A is equal to x, then A is equal to inverse cosine of x. Isn't that crazy? Cosine, inverse cosine? Aren't we just so original with these names?
Yeah.
No. Okay? Same thing mathematically, what happens here, guys? We start out with cosine of angle A is equal to x. And then I say, hey, I just want to know the angle measure. Okay? So I take the inverse cosine so I can undo that cosine. So I take the inverse cosine of both sides. Just like you multiply both sides, divide both sides, add both sides, subtract both sides, we take the inverse cosine of both sides. Inverse cosine and cosine simplify out, left with angle A. And then we have the inverse cosine of x. Is that one very similar? Okay. Any guesses what I'm going to write for if tangent of A equals x, then what?
A equals sine.
No, inverse tangent.
A is equal to the inverse tangent of x. Once again, we're really original with our names here, guys. What's the inverse of sine? Inverse sine. What's the inverse of cosine? Inverse cosine. What's the inverse of tangent?
Inverse
tangent.
Not too hard.
So, really, really creative with our names. Okay? That's one of my favorite part of math, is just how creative we are with names. Okay? Questions? Okay. So, we're going to practice a little bit, just on our calculator. So make sure we all have access to a calculator. I'll make sure we all have access to a calculator, okay? I really advocate, guys, to try and use my calculators right now, okay? Just because when you go on a test, are you going to be able to use your phone's calculator?
Yes.
No. So it's probably good to get used to what you're going to use on a test, right? Okay? Now, if you want to also practice on your phone, because that's what you're going to have at home when you do homework, I understand practicing on both. I get that. I get practicing on both, but I really don't want us to lose our practice on the ones I have, because that's what you're going to probably be using during your test, okay? So I'm going to be practicing with whatever you're going to use on a test to help us out. So, in example 1, we're going to have find angle C if sine of angle C is equal to 0.24. Find angle C if sine of angle C is equal to 0.24. So, we're currently currently taking the sine at angle C. How do I get angle C by itself? How do I undo sine? Inverse sine. I take the inverse sine of both sides.
Wait,
Okay.
don't think fast. Okay, I thought you locked this.
I take the inverse sine of both sides. Inverse sine and sine simplify out, and I now get C is equal to the inverse sine of 0.24. And let's go to the nearest, tenth of a degree. Let's go to the nearest tenth of a degree. This is an angle measure, so we're in degrees. So raise your hand if you can tell me what C is approximately here to the nearest tenth of a degree. 13.9 approximately. It's approximately 13.9 degrees is what the measure of angle C would be. So you actually really should have a measure of angle C. I really should have the measure of angle C there. They didn't have it in front of the measure there. So on your scientific calculator, you push the second button, and then you push sine. Because if you look right above sine, in that small little print, it says inverse sine. I want everyone to make sure they type this in. Did everybody get this on their calculator? If you didn't, raise your hand right now, because I need to help you get this on your calculator. If you can't do this right now, then we need to continue on. If you're going to only practicing with an actual and you miss an explanation of that, it's because that's what you're going to have when you do your test. Okay? I can also help you on your iPhone. Real quick tutorial on the iPhone. You would just type in 0.24, hit the second button as you turn it sideways, and hit the inverse sine button. Okay? Yes, James X. Stevens.
I got the same one.
Okay. You're good. Okay. Did you get this?
No, on my calculator.
Okay.
So it's
Hit second sine for inverse sine, and then 0.24. Did you get the number or no? Wait, what? Okay, let me help you.
got it.
Because what we did mathematically was we took the inverse sine of both sides. Does that make any sense or no? Okay. I want you guys to go and try and find, go ahead and do B. So find the measure angle C for letter B. If you have it or have questions, raise your hand. Once again, we're going to go to the nearest tenth. The nearest tenth of a degree. Check. Okay, don't forget labels. Don't forget labels. Okay. Don't forget labels. Okay. Don't check. We did inverse sine. Because inverse sine is on this side. How do we undo? Yep. Yep. So I don't want us to lose sight, guys, here, that we're actually taking the inverse of both sides. We're actually doing an inverse trig function on both sides. So on here, you type in the same word. So here we type in the same word. You can see it on the iPhone calculator. You have to type in the number first and then the operation. Okay. So to get C by itself, we have to undo cosine. So to undo cosine, we do inverse cosine. Once again, really original with our names here, guys. So inverse cosine and cosine undo each other with angle C. The measure of angle C will be equal to inverse cosine of 0.37. So the measure of angle C ends up being approximately, what did we get? 68.3 degrees. Now I'll give you guys directions on how far around. So just look for our directions to know how far around. You type the now on the iPhone calculator, you have to type your number in first, then you have to do the operation. Okay, any other question? Okay, so now we're going to look through example 2, and we're going to say, okay, well, how can we find an angle now? So we have this right, we need to be given that this is the right triangle. I need to add this in here, excuse me. Let's add this in here, this is the right angle.
It is.
Angle S is the right angle. It is on yours? Oh, nice. Okay. Stonks. Okay. So we know this is the right triangle. We have two of the sides, and now we need to find an angle. Before, we couldn't have done this. Now we can. So in order to find measuring angle Q, this is our reference angle. So we're still going to label like we did for our last section. So what is 15? And what's 8? Adjacent. So what trig function deals with adjacent and hypotenuse? Cosine. So we're going to still set this up. Cosine of an angle. In this case, what angle are we dealing with? Q. We don't know the measure yet. We're just going to call it cosine of angle Q. And that's equal to what?
15.
8 over 15. Adjacent over hypotenuse. So that'd still be the setup. We set it up the same way we would with the trig functions otherwise when we were finding the side length. But now it's just our unknown is an angle versus one of the side lengths. So how would I get angle Q by itself?
Inverse.
Not divide by cosine because we're not multiplying cosine and Q. We have to do the inverse cosine. So we take the inverse cosine. I'll do this in a second color just to highlight it. Okay. We take the inverse cosine of both sides. Inverse cosine and cosine undo each other. So we have angle Q is now equal to the inverse cosine of 8 over 15. All times we'll put that in parentheses where we're taking the sine or inverse sine or the trig function, the inverse trig function of. So now in your calculator, you can just type in inverse cosine 8 divided by 15, close your parenthesis, and you get measuring angle Q. And we're asked to find it to the nearest what? 10th of a degree. Once you have this or have questions, raise your hand. Very good. Don't forget your label. No object. Go nearest 10th to the nearest whole degree. No object. No vote. If you need help as well, raise your hand.
What did you get?
That's so cool. I just guessed. I'm driving stuff. I didn't even pass that class. I don't really care anymore. I didn't eat lunch till 12:30. Why is that?
Raise your hand if you're having trouble with this problem. Raise your hand if you haven't got it yet. Okay? Going back to our seats then. Yeah. So after we take the inverse cosine of both sides, and once again, guys, I don't want us to lose sight of the math we're doing here. They don't want us to get robotic with it and take inverse cosine of both sides, call it good, and type in our calculator. I want us to actually make sure we're writing out the math we're doing here. Sometimes the habit can be we just jump straight from the blue down to this step and say the measured angle Q is approximately 57.8 degrees. Now on an iPhone calculator, what you'd have to do to get the right answer is take 8 divided by 15 and then take the inverse cosine of that number. On the iPhone calculator, you have to do the division first and then take the inverse cosine of that calculator because the iPhone does not have a true scientific calculator on it. So you'd have to kind of work around the system first. Okay, question on that? Okay, here's our last problem with this whole packet.
No way.
Wait, with this whole packet?
Yes.
That's so cool.
Where are we going?
Home.
Interesting.
Wait, so when is spring break?
Starts with 13.
It starts next Friday.
Oh, we're going.
So we're not gonna test till after.
Wait,
Yep, we're doing
Come
the
back
second,
on
our second
You
class.
already
after
know
spring break.
what binge watch. Do we have some?
No, you just said that.
So,
Yeah, great.
I still have to be here.
Oh my god, does he not like
It's okay.
no, he doesn't pay attention.
No.
This will go by fast, or is it just me?
This week?
No,
Oh, this week went by.
Oh yeah, this fact didn't go by pretty
Yeah,
quick.
this was the
It's
I don't know
actually
what
four,
you're
it's actually
talking
only 4 lessons though. So it's a really short one comparatively. Because we skipped 7-3, don't do it, I don't like it. And we combine 7-4, 7-5.
473.
A road rises 10 feet in a horizontal. Road rises 10 feet in a horizontal distance of 200 feet. What is the angle of inclination? You want to do this?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I don't know if I can do the whole thing, but I can draw it.
Okay, cool.
connected to my
I believe in you, Graydon. I believe in me, too.
I'm not sure how much of it.
Oh my goodness, wait, I did it. I'm gonna do it.
Brother.
That's awful.
That's sharp incline, but
It is.
that's 10 feet. That's how much incline. So that's a right angle. That's 200 feet.
You are not very good at drawing. Wait, I feel like.
Worse than I am.
Is that actually it? Because that's not
Yeah,
what
you
I
can
got.
redo that. Please redo that.
That's
It's
not
really
what I
bad.
got. Maybe I'm just dumb. Oh wait.
Yeah, maximize that.
Alright,
For
round
big
two.
mistakes. Yeah, yours.
Okay, okay. I got it.
It's already better.
To the side a little.
Wait, I feel like
It's not true right
bro.
There we go. That's what I'm talking about.
Wait, Mr. Prosser.
Ah.
Is that right?
Oh,
Yeah.
Mr. Prosser. Is that right?
No.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take a look at mine because I must have did it wrong.
Okay, real quick. A road rises 10 feet. This is our road. It rises 10 feet, goes up 10 feet. We'll pretend this is perfectly up and down, but Graydon's good at drawing. Over a horizontal distance of 200 feet.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'm just.
So over the course of horizontal 200 feet, the road rises 10 feet. So here's the actual road. Now this is going to be a right angle because it's rising on the horizontal distance. And we're asked, what is the angle of inclination? Which angle would that be referring to? The one on this side. It'd be this angle, which we could call theta. Remember I was talking about theta last lesson? Circle with like an O with a line through the middle. It could be called theta, our variable for an angle oftentimes. It's the angle of inclination. How do we know that one's the angle of inclination or elevation?
It's going up.
It's going up from our horizontal
It's not
reference.
depressing.
From horizontal reference is going up, okay? Question on that.
Oh wait, I still got the same answer though.
Okay. Well, now, I want you guys to set this one up and solve it.
Uh-oh.
Okay, wait, I think yeah.
That's a bit of a problem.
It's very similar to number 2. Answer that. Well, what are you given? Okay. Yes, it does. Yeah, but it tells you what size you're given. When you have or have questions, raise your hand. Don't object.
Oh.
How is it?
10 divided by 200.
Is 1 10 hard? Oh, that's why.
I don't
You can
know.
also say that 10 divided by 200.
I did some other ways and I got the same answer, so I was like confused. You don't know about that. So I was doing off the other angle. Oh, the other angle.
Is that the height of
Let's go to the nearest 10th of a degree.
Two sides that you have are which one?
She's across from everything.
I don't know that. I mean, like,
Go.
the opposite.
So it's the same as the first one?
Hypotenuse opposite the right angle. And it's also along this one.
I don't know. What is that thing?
I win.
No, opposite the right angles.
Consider it.
Is it right?
So the two that have the opposite and adjacent. So which rule? I mean, like, of the
But
what less weight? Out of these three, it uses opposite and adjacent.
What?
I mean, Kevin, do you have steam lunch today?
Wrong one.
Oh, Kevin.
Taylor, I have a beach lunch.
Go.
Dumb?
What?
I thought you just said
I got the right.
Okay.
I memorized it. Do you ride the bus?
So you're gonna put that.
Yes, every day.
No, wait, wait, wait.
What?
You don't
I
want
just
to
put
memorize
this
everything?
like the circle.
Yeah, do you have track?
So is equal to,
Okay, no.
and then you write the tangent
I
of
didn't
the
like when I
triangle, which is the opposite side.
The president? Yeah, I know all the predators. E, okay.
As the majority of
Right.
the use predators to describe. Kevin, what are you doing track? I mean, for a dance.
Pardon?
What are you doing track?
I'm the
So it's gonna
Like
be
even-
the opposite
Yeah.
side.
And then for the
I
eyes.
don't know. They're planning on putting me in some, which cause I coached
So
in
what you
the
have
past,
to
but
do now is try and get the angle by itself.
I really don't know.
I would love to do it.
So you would use the
Yeah, the
inverse.
things I wanna do
There you go.
are pole vaulting.
Okay, guys, Mr. Prince is gonna solve this one for us.
And long jump.
I think you actually wrote cosine. Okay, so we end up getting 2.9 degrees as our approximate answer. Since being 2.9 degrees is our approximate answer. So it's set it up as tangent. The reason we choose tangent is these are given the opposite 10 and the adjacent 200 compared to our reference angle that we're trying to find. So we choose tangent as opposite or adjacent 10 over 200. So we take the inverse tangent of both sides to get theta by itself. And the inverse tangent of 10 over 200 is approximately 2.9 degrees straight.
What if, like on the test or homework, we didn't put the measure? Like I just put
On the homework actually it just tells you, it actually gives you the spots for it. So I think the test actually gives you the spots for it as well. So you
But
should
like
get
on that word question on the back?
Wait, word question on the back? Yeah, you don't have to put measure name, you just put the name on this one. The way it's worded. Yeah. Any questions on that one, guys? Because we need to know how to set it up and how to solve it. So if you have questions on either, I want to help you. Yeah.
It's not Wednesday, I should not be able to see.
Sorry, I didn't time up the color of this worksheet perfectly with the day before I started.
How dare you?
That'd be amazing. This is probably why you're my favorite type of art. This is why you're probably my favorite sister of Betsy.
But you don't even know it.
Not who?
Not Emily.
I didn't even know there was another one. Oh. Don't shade though.
She's cuter.
She was in my younger